You're tuned into the hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to Into the Fringe, number 47. And our guest this evening is Albert Rosales. Born in Cuba, Albert S. Rosales migrated to the U.S. in 1966. He had several unusual incidents as a young man while living in Cuba, and such incidents continued as an adult into the U.S. Rosales became interested in unusual phenomena and UFOs at a young age, but soon directed his focus to the crux of the phenomena: the humanoids, entities, extraterrestrials, UFOnauts, etc. He began collecting data on such encounters from worldwide sources in the late 80s. He has a current database of over 20,000 entries, which is updated and corrected daily, and has published 16 books to date. Welcome back to Into the Fringe, Albert Rosales.
Hey, Gil. Thanks for having me again. It's my pleasure to be back here with you guys.
Well, it's great to have you, and I just wanted to let people know about a programming note. Tomorrow, I will be co-hosting Tea and Telly with Maria of Tea and Telly, and Tracy will also be co-hosting with us, and we are going to apparently battle about which is better, Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie. So that'll be fun. And of course, remember folks, stay until the end of the show when we'll be giving away a signed copy of Albert's book from tonight, Humanoid Encounters, The Others Among Us, 1960 to 1964. Now, I know we're jumping around a bit here, Albert, but I wanted to show off some UFO humanoid-related art while we're waiting for people to roll in. So I'm going to show some stuff here on my screen.
Okay.
And first, I'm going to share the cover of tonight's book, of course, and that's the back of the book. And this is some artwork by Jason Gleaves, and I wanted to see if you could tell me which one is which. Who's that?
Travis Walton?
It's Calvin Parker, but it's
Calvin
pretty hard
Parker.
to tell.
Okay. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay.
And this is all sculpted and painted by Jason.
That's very good.
And I'll tell you how to get a hold of him if you want some of this of your own. And you know who that is, right?
Nordic. Okay.
That's the female entity that Calvin had to deal with.
Okay.
And you know that one, right?
Ooh, is that from... okay, there you go. Yeah, Pascagoula. The entities that took Calvin Parker and Hickson into the ship.
Yeah, those are the ones that floated over and grabbed them at the blonde woman's command, and they're the ones that Calvin called the ugly ones.
I would have too.
And then here we have the TR3B, or the Black Manta, which is just exquisite art, I think.
Yeah, it is a detail. Nicely detailed, yeah.
And then this one is the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting, the very first craft, the chevron-shaped craft that basically started the modern UFO age.
Right. For some reason, they were called saucers, but they were not really saucer-shaped, okay?
Yeah.
Here we got Flatwoods, 1952.
Yes.
Yeah.
Flatwoods County monster. It's pretty scary, even just a photograph of a little, I mean, the thing's hardly as big as my thumb, probably. But they're really nice. And this is the, I think one of the Roswell aliens that survived, or maybe didn't. He's not looking too hot.
No.
That's a better picture, I think, of
the female, the blonde female.
Yeah. And she's got the really long fingers.
Okay. It's funny, when it originally happened, the incident Pascagoula, nothing like that came out, that there was another entity inside the vehicle. Later on, that's when it all came out, which is, I find, very interesting.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And let's see who's here already. Because without a chat, we wouldn't have a show, right? Hale, Canadian Spider-Man. Gap Stargate. Hale, Mr. M.H. Good to see you. Daddy S. Munchausen. Hale. Mr. M.H. says, Albert Rosales is one of my favorite guests. He is a living legend with regards to the study of humanoids. Full respect to you, Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Gap Stargate says, cheers y'all for tonight with Albert Rosales. We are giving away a copy of his book, Humanoid Encounters, The Others Among Us, 1960 to 1964. You must be present in the chat to enter to win. Evening, Yvonne. And there's a copy of the book right there. And lots of helloing and hailing and that kind of thing. So we will probably just roll on. Mr. MH says it looks kind of like Orthon, but with blue clothes. He had red clothes. Wow. Nice. Supposedly.
Orthon?
Okay. So let's go ahead and get started here. I guess I'll begin. The first one that we're going to be talking about is from 1960, near Lusk, Wyoming. Date 1960, time unknown. The 5-year-old witness remembers seeing an object on the ground somewhere off the main highway. The object had a dome and some kind of wavy golden-colored band on the bottom and shaped like a seashell. Where have we heard that before? It rested on 5 stilt-like legs. It had a long ramp that reached to the ground with ridges for foot grip. He saw 2 beings dressed in white robes next to the craft. They were very human-like with large eyes.
This case was sent to me directly by the witness. He didn't provide much information, but he sounded legit. He didn't want to go too much into details. But
yeah, you can pretty much tell that they're for real when they don't want to use their name.
The early 60s was a slow period as far as UFO encounters. Then it picked up again 1964, and then never stopped for a while.
Yeah. Okay,
the next one is going to be in Argentina, a place that never stops. It's called at a place called San Antonio Oeste, Argentina. The date is 1960, about 2 a.m. An anonymous witness reported waking up to a loud humming sound and a very bright light shining from outside his window. The humming was getting louder, and when he opened the window to see what it was, he spotted over some railroad tracks about 300 meters away 3 disc-shaped craft that had landed on the tracks. They seem to do that a lot. Suddenly, several
they've even bent railroad tracks.
Yeah. in France, 1954. Suddenly, several tall man-like figures wearing white clothing appeared. Again, these are wearing white clothing again. They began to perform what appeared to be repairs on the middle of the object, in the center, which went slightly up and down on several occasions as the men kneeled under it and looked inside. Interesting. The activity went on until about 5 a.m. That's about 3 hours. Too bad there were no cell phones back then. When the men seemed to congratulate each other, apparently having corrected the problem. The men then disappeared behind the objects. Moments later, the objects took off and disappeared at high speed. He could only describe the entities as tall and human-like. This I got from Project Catent, which is the catalog of entities from Argentina, from researcher Claudio Misca.
And you got this directly from the researcher?
Yeah, I got this from the group Catent directly. They sent me a whole bunch of from Argentina.
Cool.
Okay, we got the next one has an image.
Okay. Yes, it does. And it's, why don't you tell us where it's from while I'm getting that image ready?
Okay, I got this from a researcher from Russia named Puchkarev. He runs a website, and he usually the reports that he have there are like reports with encounters with almas, which in other words, what they call Bigfoot up in Siberia or in Russia. And this is an interesting report.
Let's dig into it.
Okay. Want me to go? Okay, I'll do it.
No, I'll do it.
You'll
I'm
do it?
just
Okay.
trying to
All right.
find out what happened to it. Oh, I drug it across to my other screen. That's what happened to it. All right. And so this is, again, in Argentina?
No, this is the Siberia, Russia.
Oh,
The one
okay.
with the
This
image.
is the one I rehearsed before, so I'll probably get it wrong. So this is from Yaroslav, Siberia, Russia, 1960. The time is the evening. And Luka V. Tiznanov was going with his two dogs from Yarkos-Gokort to Yakovo village along the banks of the river Ob when his dogs began to bark and bare their teeth before running forward and then returning to him very frightened. Two beings, one 2 meters tall, the other rather smaller, came out of the forest. Their eyes seemed to emit a red light like a lantern, and their bodies were covered with black hair. Their arms were unusually long, and they swung in an unusual manner. Their gait was strange also, their legs turning as they walked. When the creatures had passed, the dogs ran off back to the village. Boy, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, those names in Russia, they could be a handful, I tell you. I enjoy you here. I enjoy you enjoy the way you pronounce them. Here we go.
Hear me stumbling over them?
The next one also has an image. This is from Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
Rico. It was sent directly to me by the researcher Jorge Martin.
Mm-hmm.
That's his drawing there, dome with the entities inside. And here we go. It was near Santa Isabel in Puerto Rico, 1960, about 2 a.m. The main witness was Mr. Carlos Matienzo Roman. Had traveled to the city of Ponce on the south end of the island, accompanied by a friend, Johnny Requena. They were to participate as a judge in a Paso Fino horse competition. Roman and Requena stayed late at the Club Deportivo and left around 2 a.m. It was a rainy night, and Mr. Roman was driving on Old State Road 1 on their way back to Rio Piedras, where Requena lived. As they approached the town of Santa Isabel, they saw at a distance over the coastal mangroves a strange light. It was something they had never seen before. As they approached the area near the source of the light, at a small curve on the road, the car They heard the car emitted a strange noise, like zoom, some kind of weird noise, and the engine shut off. Okay, they now could see that they were in front of an object that was a large object that was on the side of the road, an object or structure which they had not seen on the way to Ponce. They described the object as round, about 30 to 35 feet in diameter and about 15 to 20 feet tall. It was standing on 3-4 leg-like supports, which raised the object about 4 feet off the ground. According to Roman, the strange object seemed to made out of a very shiny metal, and it was encased in a yellowish glow. Near the object, both men could hear. Once near the object, both men could hear a low humming sound, which suddenly began to increase in intensity. According to Roman, it was like listening to a large swarm of bees. At the same time that the humming sound increased, the men began to feel that what they describe as intermittent heat waves, which seemed to emanate from the craft. Sometimes when I translate these stuff, I leave stuff out. The heat waves were also gradually increasing in intensity until it thankfully leveled out and did not keep increasing. Roman wanted to exit the car to see what the object was, but Requena begged him to stay in the vehicle. Roman attempted to restart the vehicle and it started. At the same time, another vehicle arrived at the scene and his engine also stopped working. Roman drove away and could now see the object from a different angle and noticed that it was surmounted with a sort of tower or cabin with large windows on the top section. He could also see people inside the object, inside looking at them. Requena also saw that the people inside the cabin. Roman described their faces as human-like in appearance. You know, most of the cases so far has been of human-like entities.
Yeah.
They were staring intently at the witnesses. Roman and Matienzo continued their journey, commenting on what they have seen. And 10 minutes later, the other vehicle, which had also been at the scene of the encounter, drove by them, and someone inside the vehicle yelled out, "It was a flying saucer," and drove away at high speed.
That's kind of funny.
Later, both men began to feel a strong ardor on their faces and hands, apparently on the exposed areas of their body. According to the man, it was as if they had been on the beach under the hot sun all day, which it had not been the case, since it had been raining and cloudy the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
As they drove on, Roman suddenly heard the following words in his mind: "Hurry, you must take a shower, hurry up." Somebody was telling him to take a shower.
Mm-hmm.
The boy spoke these words several times. Roman told Requena, but this one seemed to ignore him. At this point, Roman accelerated the vehicle and arrived at Rio Piedras at around 4 a.m., dropping off Requena at his home. Roman then drove to his home in the St. Just neighborhood area of Trujillo, Puerto Rico, where he kept chickens in a small farm. Upon arriving, he removed his clothing and immediately took a long shower, and the ardor he had been feeling on his face and hands disappeared. As he was getting ready for bed again, Roman heard the strange voice in his head which said to him, "Look out the window." And when he opened the window, he saw high in the sky the same object they had seen before. He briefly looked away, and when he looked back, the light had vanished. The next day, Matienzo noticed, this is Roman, noticed that the left side of the car felt unusually hot. It was the part that had been facing the object. The area remained unusually hot for several days until it slowly returned to normal. The paint became opaque, and Matienzo had to paint that side of the vehicle again. Sometime later, Roman noticed that his hair was falling out in large quantities until he was completely bald. That's what happened to me. Also, Requena's demeanor completely changed. That's the other guy. He seemed sad and lethargic. He became very weak, and 1 year later he died of what doctors diagnosed as leukemia. He didn't remember, this one didn't take a shower. Roman was convinced that they both had been exposed to some kind of radiation from the object. However, Roman is convinced that it had not been something deliberate, but an accident. Apparently, Requena did not immediately take a shower and waited for the morning to do it. Later, Roman learned that showering was a means to diminish negative effects as a result of radiation,
Yep.
which is true. He is convinced that the occupants of the vessel saved his life. Years later, Roman reported additional encounters at his coffee plantation in Las Marias. According to Roman, he was told that the powers to be on Earth were conducting dangerous experiments with energies that were capable of destroying the world and that it must stop immediately. He was also told that the ships and entities he and Requena had encountered were from a solar system which was part of the star Sirius. This is directly from I gotta fix the wording on that, but this is directly from researcher Jorge Martin Miranda, which he has done an excellent work in Puerto Rico. Pretty bizarre case.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'm going to share this image here before I move on.
Okay.
Just to give people a look at that. And go back to us. And so this is in an unpronounceable location, Andekær Mose, Denmark.
There you go.
January 11th, 1960 at 5:45 a.m. The witness was on his way to a garage when he saw a small humanoid wearing a gray-green spacesuit. The witness had a small flashlight and he pointed the light at the humanoid. The humanoid suddenly rose up 30 meters into the air, and entered a hovering disc-shaped object. The humanoid was wearing a helmet with small antenna. The object emitted a bright flash and disappeared, emitting a humming sound. I'll do the next one since you had a 3-page one.
Yeah, this case was sent to me directly by the Danish researcher Per Andersen.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to get this next one ready to show here.
Yeah. Interesting case from France. There's an image there.
That's where the cone heads are from, I think. So this is for the one I'm about to read.
Yeah.
And this is in Puy-de-Dôme, France. Spring 1960, time 2 a.m. Germain Tichy, a baker working at night, heard an unusual rumbling noise and saw colored lights. Going outside, he saw an object 30 to 45 feet in diameter standing on a hillside across the street on a bellows-like undercarriage. The top half of the lens-shaped object bore red, blue, and yellow light tubes and was rotating rapidly. A warm wind blew from it. A ladder was then lowered from it, and a very small man descended wearing boots, tight-fitting trousers, a gray-green jacket, and a helmet of the same color. On his belt were 4 boxes, and on his right side he had what looked like a curved sword. As Tichy approached this midget, intending to capture him, he pointed at Tichy a long tube emitting a beam of intense white light, which made it very difficult to breathe, but throwing his hands up to protect his face, Tichy continued to advance. The being about-faced and returned to his machine, which, after shutting with a clang, rose vertically, then shot off to join a group of similar objects in the sky, which all moved together.
Moved away, yeah. From a French researcher, Joel Mesnard.
And there's a weapon involved?
Well, he had the entity pointed a tube at him. Maybe that's some kind of defensive weapon. And he had something on the side that looked like a sword. I'm sure it wasn't a sword, but... Okay, the next one is from Japan. You don't hear too many cases from there, but yeah, we do get them.
Yeah.
It's like a contact case. There's the image on that. And Okayama City, Japan, April 30, 1960. The time 4 a.m. Mr. Y, a 45-year-old local man, suddenly woke up to the sound of someone knocking on the front door of his apartment. He opened the door, but there wasn't anyone around. However, when looking up at the sky, he saw 3 Saturn-shaped objects emitting a silvery light. The objects were very large, about 35 meters in diameter and 20 meters in height. Mr. Y put on some clothes and walked in the direction of the hovering object. 2 of the objects left. However, the third object descended northwest towards an old playing field, which is now Okayama Comprehensive Sports Stadium. Located about a kilometer from the witness' house, in a very excited state, he ran towards the field, hoping to see the object closer. As he entered the field, a huge Saturn-shaped disc was floating in the air. He then landed on the grass plaza about 400 meters away. As Mr. Y walked towards the disc, he saw a human-like figure, apparently from the disc, standing by a pond about 200 meters away. The being or figure is wearing a silver phosphorescent suit that covered his whole body, and he was a giant, about 2.40 meters tall. So over 7 feet.
That is a giant.
Yeah, the alien figure approached Mr. Y, holding out his hand as if asking for a handshake. Eventually, Mr. Y shook hands with the alien, who immediately removed the face plate from his helmet, revealing his face. Mr. Y, the witness, described the alien as very handsome with European features, European face. The alien then spoke in Japanese to Mr. Y for some.
Now I remember this case.
Yeah. For some unstated reason, Mr. Y could not board the disc, but spoke extensively with the visitor, sitting down on the grass 60 to 70 meters away from the disc. The alien then finished talking and walked with Mr. Y to the vicinity of the pond. There he seemed to have some difficulty breathing and bade farewell to Mr. Y. He then ran back to the disc. Excuse me. The disc then rose without a sound and disappeared instantly from view. Mr. Y then quickly returned to his apartment, noticing that it was now already 5:15 a.m. He had left at 4 a.m., so he was there for a while. Okay. Mr. Y asked the alien the following questions. Where do you come from? The alien answered, even if I told you, you wouldn't comprehend.
Hang on a second. Hang on.
Sure.
I'm getting a little unsure of what's going on. So it says, for some unstated reason, Mr. Y could not board the disc, but spoke extensively with the visitor. The alien then finished talking and walked with Mr. Y to the vicinity of the pond. Then he bade farewell to Mr. Y. He then ran back to the disc. Then it rose from view.
Now he mentions what he asked the alien at the end.
Oh, so this is about their previous conversation.
Yeah, the previous conversation.
Sorry, as you were.
He asked the alien the following question: where do you come from? The alien answered, even if I told you, you wouldn't comprehend. It's a very distant star. How do you speak excellent Japanese? The alien answered, I learned it using some special equipment.
I know Kung Fu.
How long did it take you to get to Earth? The alien answered, 30 minutes, Earth time. Wow. Can you show me around your spacecraft? The alien answered, today will be impossible, but one day you will be able to. Will your friends be with you next time I see you? The alien answered, for the time being, I only want to talk to you. The alien asked the following 2 questions to Mr. Y. What language do you speak, and what is the purpose for living?
He didn't ask him what he did for a living. He just said, what is the purpose for living?
This is from a Japanese researcher, Tsunataka Uchino. Bogi wrote it back in 1978.
And if it were appropriate, he could ask him back, I don't know, what do you think is the purpose of living? Why ask me?
That's very hard. He should know himself, you think?
Okay, so this next one is from Miami Beach, Florida, July 21, 1960. Got a lot of 1960 cases today.
Yeah.
Time is evening.
This This is a short
Shortly
one.
after a misty blue cloud with a bright center was seen in Miami, a power failure took place. A crowd of people chased a spaceman wearing bubble headgear with gold on it on Collins Avenue, but lost him.
That's pretty weird. Collins Avenue is right in the middle of Miami Beach.
Oh,
Back
yeah?
then,
You've been there?
Oh, yeah. Not too far from where I live, but back then in 1960, it wasn't, that populated. It was, so I always found that case intriguing. There's not much information on it, but it's from my part of the woods. This is from the April Bulletin, July 1960. All right, the next one is an abduction from a place called Alta Vista in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Water. The witness was alone in her bedroom late at night when she suddenly had the feeling that she was being watched. Excuse me. Looking at her window, she noticed several figures looking at her. Next thing she remembered was floating above her complex, looking down at a brightly lit area. Several beings, which she described as having large egg-shaped heads with large insect-like eyes, had apparently come through the wall of her room and floated her up through the roof. She looked up to see a large circular craft ring with two sets of lights, some flashing red, yellow, and blue in color. A portal opened in the center of the craft into a bay-like area. Other beings stood there. These appeared to be taller than the others and wore different uniforms. She was then led into a very dark room. There, a large oval-shaped door opened into a room with a central walkway, and three of the four beings waited for her behind what appeared to be a hospital gurney. There, the beings examined her eyes and brain area with a large X-ray type apparatus. She was eventually brought back to her bedroom. This is from Canadian researcher Robert Colombo. So this is describing gray-like entities.
Yeah. I find it interesting that the last few cases mention 3 to 4 beings. I think I would remember. I don't need to find out to see if I would remember, but I think I would remember how many beings there were. Okay, this next case is between Brownsville and Uniontown, Pennsylvania, 1961, time 2300 hours. While watching television, the family of Anne Marie Lacey, involved in other encounters, heard something that sounded like an aircraft in distress from outside. Then they all followed their father outside to check. They could hear a droning-like noise at a distance, and it got closer. When they all looked up, immediately above the rooftop, they saw an object that resembled an old World War II plane engulfed in flames. That could explain some disappearances. They could hear all kinds of sirens and whistles coming from it. If it were a Stuka, it would probably be whistling. Her father became agitated and screamed that the thing was going to go down. Then everything got kind of strange. Everything seemed to slow down. Anne-Marie could now see, instead of the plane, a round object with a dome. She saw about 7 portal-like windows, and standing behind them were several entities, gray in color and wearing scuba diving outfits. The entities were staring down at the family, completely emotionless. They waited for it to crash, but it kind of drifted off without ever hitting the ground. They stayed outside for a while.
So this appears to be a UFO camouflaging itself, making it look like an aircraft.
That's weird, especially for 1961.
Yeah, 1961.
Think about what they could do now. You know?
Okay. We're going back to Argentina now.
Back to Argentina.
Mar del Plata in La Buenos Aires province, Argentina, 1961, at night, in the neighborhood called Gloria de la Peregrina on Route 20, farm worker shows the initial ER 35, was doing his usual duties in his home when he heard a noise at the door. And when he opened the door, he was confronted by two human-like figures wearing one-piece outfits who displayed a friendly demeanor towards the witness. The two men told the witness they were interested in a certain domestic element from the kitchen. In exchange for the witness' cooperation, they invited him to follow them to the ship in which they arrived. A few meters away, the witness was able to see a sort of circular ship resting on the ground and about 50 meters in diameter. ER added that the strange individuals insisted that he come with them as they could introduce him to their leader. Take me to your leader. Yeah. Once inside, ER sat in a comfortable chair and was taken to another location. On that short trip, ER was able to see a strange landscape consisting of desert and limestone rocks. He also saw what appeared to be a small structure. Upon arriving at that location, he was introduced to the leader, a human-like figure sporting a short beard, who greeted the witness and then began questioning him.
Oh my gosh, it was Alan Hynek.
As a trade-in for the kitchen utensil, not describe what it was, that the witness gave the man, he was in turn given a small metallic cube-shaped object, and then taken back to the ship and brought back to the same location where he had departed from. The witness went on to live a normal life, and always thought that those beings he had met were kind, and would not hesitate to go with them if given another opportunity. He never thought publicity for the encounter. He kept the small metallic cube-like object for a time, and made many attempts to open it, but was never successful. One day, the object mysteriously disappeared. Yeah, it happens a lot.
Isn't that interesting?
This is from Argentinian researcher Carlos Ferguson. He wrote a book about 700 pages detailing encounters in Argentina.
So this next one is kind of from my neck of the woods, it sounds like.
Kansas. Yeah.
Webster Lake, Kansas, and I have no clue where that is, so don't bother asking me. 1961, the time midnight. Sharon Cedar remembers camping in the area with her family and friends. Later that night, they had gone to sleep. Around midnight, Sharon suddenly woke up and walked outside the tent. Immediately, she was confronted by two very tall figures, well-proportioned and wearing shiny, tight-fitting silvery outfits. I think I remember either Charles Hickson or Calvin Parker mentioning that the female was well-proportioned and tall. And they were wearing tight-fitting silvery outfits. They reminded her of the Oscar Award statues. They had large almond-shaped eyes like the ones in old Egyptian paintings. First she was afraid, but then received a reassuring mental message, "Don't be afraid, we will not harm you." And immediately, complete calm overcame her. Then she saw their craft, which was nearby. Inexplicably, she found herself inside the craft, but she doesn't remember walking toward it. There was light everywhere, but she couldn't see the source. She saw a huge monitor with a keyboard. The keys on the keyboard were of different colors and about the size of a quarter. Apparently they had an Avid aboard the craft. On the walls, she saw windows resembling those of bull's eyes portholes on ships. Inside, there were three more beings, one of them a woman. One of the figures then approached the keyboard, and the craft took off. She could now see that the screen on the monitor was filled with endless fields of stars. She could also see Earth, which was blue and beautiful. The whole time she communicated with them telepathically. She asked where they were from, and they pointed at some stars which she didn't know. She then said, "Venus," and they said no, and mentioned Sirius. She was eventually returned to the camping site.
It's interesting. Remember the other case, which they said they were from Sirius? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The same. I think it was 1960.
Some very interesting stuff about Sirius.
Let's be serious.
You remember the account of the Dogon tribe in, I think it's
Africa. Yeah.
in New Guinea? Yeah. The first time that white Indo-European anthropologists made contact with them, they talked to them about Sirius, and I think it was 1950, and the Dogon tribe knew that there was not only an A Sirius star, but a B Sirius star, which was much dimmer, and a C star, which is allegedly a black hole. How they knew that, I don't know.
Correctly. This is from Africa. I think Guinea. Yeah, very interesting. Sirius has been, not only in these two cases, other instances, they claim they were from that region in space. Who knows? Anyway, the next case, interesting graphic there, is from Halbiking Hammerdal in Sweden. Winter of 1961, the time in the evening. The witnesses, one named Agren Balborg, and the second one, a female named Tilda S. They don't give the last name. Were on their way to a choir practice on a cold Thursday evening. They had just passed a farm in Giselas when Agren spotted some strange lights on the left side of the road, about 150 meters away. She stopped the car and started watching. It was very beautiful. It was a very beautiful winter evening, and there was a clear moonlight, so they could clearly see everything. Then on the field, amidst a grove of pine bushes, they saw two figures standing perfectly still. They were perhaps 7 to 8 feet away from each other. The figures wore some kind of helmet on their heads and shiny dark coats that came down to their knees. Around them on the ground there were lots of hoses, what appeared to be hoses, coiled up and apparently tangled. There was a sort of cap at the end of several of these hoses, and from the other end they emitted a shower of sparks, like bright sparklers. It was these that the women had originally seen. Those two figures were holding some of the hoses. I put hoses as hoses. I'm telling you. They now could see a third figure standing next to the hose. This figure sometimes will move and then remain still, but when he moved, he seemed to do so in long jumping strides away from the hoses. It was difficult to discern his features.
Are these houses or horses?
Hoses. I'm sorry.
They're hoses. Okay.
Hoses, yeah, like in the image. Hoses on the ground.
Oh, right.
Yeah. A little to the side of the grove there was a large spruce, and from the middle of its trunk, a reddish light will sometimes flare up. Apparently, the moving figure will do something that will cause the red light to increase in intensity. At times, a white light, at least 1 meter in diameter, will slide down from the treetop and went over to the red glow on the center of the spruce. They saw that at least 4 or 5 times. The two witnesses sat there watching the spectacle for a while, and then Agren suggested that they drive up the railroad station by the farm and watch the scene from a different angle. The scene was practically the same, and then they decided to drive back and take a gravel road shorter to the scene. They noticed no reaction from the strange group of entities. They parked and decided to approach them on the gravel road. But they had gone only a couple of steps when their courage failed them. They returned to their vehicle and drove back home. A week later, they told a third party what they had seen that night. A close examination of the site failed to find any ground traces or marks. Yeah, there were hoses. There were like several hoses on the ground, tangled up, and they were emitting a sparkle. God knows what they were. Pretty weird.
Yeah. If they were lucky, they were just regular hoses. Okay, so this next one is in Black Rock Desert, Nevada, in the spring of 1961 during the afternoon. Johnny Sue, an American Indian, was looking for stray stock in northwestern Nevada. He was riding his horse along some automobile tracks in a very rugged area when he suddenly realized that the tracks were no longer there. Out of curiosity, Johnny turned his horse and rode back to find out where the tracks had turned off. He came upon them again, but they had not turned off. They had simply stopped, with no evidence that the vehicle had turned around or retraced its own tracks in reverse. Puzzled, Johnny Sue continued his way when suddenly a funny feeling came over him. Something compelled him to turn his horse into the mouth of a narrow canyon. As he rode on, he was overcome by a lethargic feeling and felt sleepy. In this lethargic state, he came upon a huge metallic object resembling a grain storage tank on the ground. Around this object were a group of persons engaged in various activities which Johnny was unable to describe. Apparently, the beings then communicated by using telepathy with the witness. Seeing that he was in the presence of some superior force, he then asked them, "Who is God?" In reply, they drew a symbol on the ground that resembled a letter O, with the angle of a smaller V intersecting its upper right shoulder. After that, the witness apparently blacked out. Before blacking out, Johnny Sue also had asked where they were from and saw a vision in his mind of a hard-to-describe world or place. When he woke up, the object and the beings were gone.
Interesting case also.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the early 60s, there were, like I said, it was a slow period, but there were some cases that were very interesting. Okay, this next case is one of my favorites. It's South Miami again, South Miami, Florida. I've been through that area dozens of times. And it's not a unique case, even though it's really high strange. South Miami, Florida, the time is March 6, 1961. The time, 22:15 hours.
Very specific.
Yep. The witness saw hovering 100 feet over a tomato field. There used to be tomato fields there now. Now they have shopping centers. a dirigible shaped object larger than any blimp he had ever seen. A large door opened in the center and three smaller objects emerged and flew off. This is the weird part. Then three cars were lowered to the ground along with an oblong vertical capsule. People came out of this capsule and entered the cars, four to each car, which then drove off towards US 1. This is right off of US 1. The capsule was then taken back into the craft, which rose and disappeared. The witness wife also saw that the object take off. Duration was less than 5 minutes. Tire tracks were found by the police next morning in a tomato field. The witness said that he was close enough to identify the cars as being Ford Galaxies. I guess not black Cadillacs. He added that small lights, very much like St. Elmo's fire, moved around the object while he was hovering. The witness failed to keep his appointment with the investigator, which was Norbert Garriety. He used to be an investigator here in South Florida.
4 Ford Galaxies, huh?
There's the reason I mentioned because there's a case from Ukraine, which is almost exactly the same thing, but this is the largest object that descended and several vehicles came out of it and drove away. This is back in 1990s. But
that's crazy.
The next one is for you.
This one, of course, is pretty famous, and anyone that sees the photograph there probably already knows where we're going with this.
Yes.
So this is near Indian Head, New Hampshire, September 19th, 1961. Time, 2200 hours. Betty and Barney Hill were driving back to Portsmouth from a vacation in Quebec. There were a few other cars on the road as they traveled south. South of Groveton, North New Hampshire, They claimed to have observed a bright point of light in the sky. While Barney navigated U.S. Route 3, Betty reasoned that she was observing a communication satellite and urged Barney to stop the car for a closer look and walk their dog Delcy. It's funny, I've read The Interrupted Journey, I've seen the UFO incident. This is the first time I remember hearing about their dog named Delcy.
Yeah.
Worried about the presence of bears, Barney removed a pistol that he had in the trunk of the car. Betty, whose sister had confided to her about having a flying saucer sighting several years earlier, observed the object through binoculars as it moved across the face of the moon, flashing multicolored lights. Barney, who had not observed the craft, thought the light was a conventional aircraft. The Hills claimed that they continued driving on the isolated road, moving very slowly so that they could observe the object as it came even closer, which they said seemed to be moving in unison with the topography and dipped in front of the peaks and descended slowly in their direction. At one point, the object appeared to land on top of Cannon Mountain, but quickly began moving again. Approximately 1 mile south of Indian Head, they said a huge craft rapidly descended toward the Hills' vehicle, causing Barney to stop directly in the middle of the highway. The craft descended to approximately 80 to 100 feet above the Hills' 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air and filled the entire field of the windshield. Barney, carrying the pistol, stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object. Using binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen about 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out of the craft's windows, seeming to look at him. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicating a message to him to stay where you are and keep looking. At that instant, red lights on what appeared to be bat wing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent craft approached to what Barney estimated was within 50 to 80 feet overhead and 50 to 100 feet away from him. Barney tore the binoculars away from his eyes and ran back to his car, saying, "They're going to capture us." He saw the object again shift its location to hover directly above the vehicle. He drove away at high speed, telling Betty to look for the object. She rolled down the window and looked up, but saw only darkness above them. Almost immediately, a series of mechanical buzzing sounds, loud enough to cause the vehicle to vibrate, seemed to come from the rear of the car. Betty touched the metal on the passenger door, expecting to feel an electric shock, but felt only the vibration. The Hills say they experienced the onset of an altered state of consciousness that left their minds dulled, and that they also felt a tingling sensation throughout their bodies. Arriving home about dawn, the Hills assert that they had some odd sensations and impulses they could not explain. Betty insisted that their luggage be kept near the back door rather than in the main part of the house. Barney noted he was compelled to examine his genitals in the bathroom, though he found nothing unusual. They took long showers to remove possible contamination, and each drew a picture of what they have observed. Their drawings were similar. Perplexed, the Hills say they tried to reconstruct a chronology of events they witnessed when they saw the UFO and drove home. But immediately after they heard the buzzing sounds, their memories became incomplete and fragmented, and they could not determine a continuous chain of events. Barney recalled saying, "Oh no, not again," though he could not place the comment in context. After sleeping for a few hours, Betty woke and placed the shoes and clothing she had worn during the drive into her closet, observing that the dress was torn at the hem, zipper, and lining. Later, when Betty retrieved the items from her closet, she noticed a pinkish powder on her dress, but had no idea where it might have come from. She threw the dress away, but later changed her mind, retrieving the dress and hanging it on a clothesline. The powder vanished in the wind, though Betty says a few pink stains were left on the dress. Over the years, she said, 5 laboratories have conducted chemical and forensic analyses on the dress. On September 21st, Betty telephoned Pease Air Force Base to report their UFO encounter, though for fear of being labeled insane, she withheld some of the details. Isn't Pease Air Force Base in Florida?
No, that's in New Hampshire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
On September 22nd, Major Paul W. Henderson telephoned the Hills for a more detailed interview lasting about 30 minutes. Henderson's report, dated September 26th, determined that the Hills probably misidentified the planet Jupiter. His report was forwarded to Project Blue Book, the Air Force's UFO research project, if you want to call it that. Okay.
No.
Within days of the encounter, Betty borrowed several UFO books from a local library. One had been written by a retired Marine Corps Major, Donald E. Kehoe, who is also the head of NICAP, a civilian UFO research group. Within 2 weeks of the UFO encounter, Betty said she was troubled with recurrent nightmares. They occurred almost nightly and were so vivid that her mind was occupied with thoughts of the dream throughout the day. On September 26th, Betty wrote to Kehoe. She related the full story, including the details about the humanoid creatures that she had neglected to report to the Air Force. Betty wrote that she and Barney were considering hypnosis to help recall what had happened. Her letter was eventually passed on to Walter N. Webb, a Boston astronomer and NICAP member. Webb met the Hills on October 21st, 1961. In a 6-hour interview, the Hills related all they could remember of the UFO encounter. Barney asserted that he had a sort of mental block regarding the encounter and that he suspected there were some portions of the event that he did not wish to remember. Webb speculated that the couple's panic regarding a close UFO sighting had generated Betty's nightmares. In November 1961, Betty began writing down the details of her vivid recurrent nightmares. In the dream, Betty seemed to be struggling to regain consciousness. She then realized that she was being forced by 2 small men to walk in a forest in the nighttime, and of seeing Barney walking alongside her, though when she called him, he seemed to be in a trance or sleepwalking. The small men stood about 5 feet tall and wore matching uniforms with caps similar to those worn in the U.S. Air Force. They had no hair on their heads and had large bulbous foreheads. In the dreams, Betty, Barney, and the small men all walked up a ramp into a disc-shaped craft of metallic appearance. Once inside, Betty and Barney were separated. She protested and was told by a man she called the leader that if she and Barney were examined together, it would take much longer to conduct the exams. She and Barney were then taken to separate rooms. Though the leader and the other men spoke to her in English, their command of the language seemed imperfect, and they had difficulty communicating. Betty then dreamt that a new man, similar to the others, entered to conduct her exam with the leader. Betty called the new man the examiner and said that he had a pleasant, calm manner. The examiner told Betty that he would conduct a quick exam and a few tests to note the differences between humans and the craft's inhabitants. He seated her on a chair, and a bright light was shone on her. The man cut off a lock of Betty's hair. He examined her eyes, ears, mouth, teeth, throat, and then her hands. He saved trimmings from her fingernails. After examining her legs and feet, the man then used a dull knife similar to a letter opener to scrape some of her skin onto a glass slide. The examiner removed Betty's dress. He told her to lie on a table. Saying that he was examining her nervous system, he dragged a machine somewhat resembling an EEG device over her front and back body. The examiner cleaned his hands with the liquid and put examination gloves on. He took out a hypodermic needle some 4 to 6 inches long to conduct what he said was a pregnancy exam. I will mention at this venture that those kinds of pregnancy tests were not yet used on this planet. He used a wet swab on her navel. He thrust the needle into it, which caused Betty agonizing pain, but the examiner rubbed her forehead and the pain vanished. Betty was told that her exam was complete and that she and Barney would shortly be returned to their automobile. She began conversing with the leader, only to be interrupted when another man rushed into the room and, seemingly excited, spoke to the leader in a strange language. They hurriedly left the room, leaving Betty alone. Returning in a few minutes, the leader examined Betty's mouth and seemed to be trying to pull her teeth from her mouth. When this was unsuccessful, the leader asked why her teeth were fixed while Barney's came out of his mouth. Laughing, Betty told them that Barney wore dentures because humans often lose their teeth as they age. The leader seemed unable to understand the concept of old age. She tried to explain what a year was, but he didn't seem to understand. In her dream, Betty asked the leader if she could take an artifact from the ship to prove the reality of the encounter. The leader let her take a large book whose pages were filled with symbols filled in columns. She then asked the leader where he and his craft had come from. Betty wrote that in response, from the wall, the leader pulled down a map, strange to me. It was a map of the heavens, marked with numerous stars and planets. There were different types of lines between some of the stars, which she denoted. She was told trade and exploration routes. The leader asked Betty if she knew where the Earth was located on the map. Betty responded by saying that she did not, being unfamiliar with the map. The leader then said because of her ignorance it was impossible to explain where he had come from. Betty then suggested that humanity would like to meet other inhabitants of the universe and tried to persuade the leader and to openly announce their presence on Earth. Amid her pleas, the men brought Barney into the room. He seemed to be in a daze. The men began escorting the Hills from the ship, though an argument broke out amongst the men in a strange language that they'd spoken before. The leader then took the large book from Betty. She protested, saying that the book was her only proof of the encounter. The leader said that he personally didn't care if she kept the book, but the other men of the ship did not want her to even remember the encounter. Betty insisted that no matter what they did to her memory, she would one day recall the events. She and Barney were taken to their car, where the leader suggested that they would wait to watch the craft's departure. They did so, and then resumed their drive. Betty stated that even though it was miraculous and exciting, Barney said nothing. Betty's dreams concluded with her asking, "Now do you believe in flying saucers?" Irritated, Barney said, "Don't be ridiculous." While Betty thought that the dreams might reflect actual events, Barney was more skeptical, thinking that his wife had simply had a number of unusually vivid dreams. On January 25th, 1961, the Hills were again interviewed...
November 25th.
November 21st, I'm sorry. Were again interviewed at length by NICAP members, this time C.D. Jackson and Robert E. Homan. Having read Webb's initial report, Jackson and Homan had many questions for the Hills. One of their main questions was about the length of their trip. Neither Webb nor the Hills had noted that, though their drive should have taken about 4 hours, they did not arrive home until 7 hours after their departure. When Homan and Jackson noted this discrepancy to the Hills, the couple was stunned, having no explanation. However, Betty was able to recall an image of the moon shining on the ground. However, despite their best efforts, the Hills could recall almost nothing of the 35 miles between Indian Head and Ashland. By February 1962, the Hills were making frequent weekend drives to try and isolate the area of their UFO encounter, hoping that locating the site might spark more memories. They were unsuccessful in trying to locate the site for several years afterward. After showing interest in being hypnotized in an attempt to recover their memories, the Hills met Dr. Benjamin Simon on December 4th, 1963. Early in their discussions, Simon determined that the UFO encounter was causing Barney far more worry and anxiety than Mr. Hill was willing to admit. Though Simon dismissed the popular extraterrestrial hypothesis as impossible, it seemed obvious to him that the Hills genuinely thought they had witnessed a UFO with human-like occupants. Simon hoped to uncover more about the experience through hypnosis. Simon began hypnotizing the Hills on January 4th, 1964. He hypnotized Betty and Barney several times each, and the sessions lasted until June 6, 1964. Simon concluded the sessions on Betty and Barney separately so they could not overhear one another's recollections. Dr. Simon hypnotized Barney first. His sessions were often quite emotional, punctuated with angry outbursts, expressions of fear, and episodes of hysterical crying. If you've ever heard, by the way, the tapes from Barney's regressions, they are just terrifying to hear. Under hypnosis, Barney also reported that the binocular strap had broken when he ran from the UFO back to his car. He recalled driving the car away from the UFO, but that afterwards he felt irresistibly compelled to pull off the road and drive into the woods. He eventually sighted 6 men standing in the woods. Commanding Barney to stop driving, 3 of the men eventually approached the car. They told Barney not to fear them. He was still anxious, however, and he reported that the leader told Barney to close his eyes. While hypnotized, Barney said, "I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes."
I guess he meant their eyes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Barney described the creatures as generally similar to Betty's hypnotic not dream recollection. However, he described their eyes as being much larger, extending even to the sides of their heads. The creatures often stared into his eyes, said Barney, with terrifying, mesmerizing effect. Under hypnosis, Barney said things like, "Only the eyes are talking to me, and all I see are these eyes. I'm not even afraid that they're not connected to a body. They're just there. They're just up close to me, pressing against my eyes." Barney related that he and Betty were taken onto the disc-shaped craft where he and Betty were separated. Taken to a room by 3 of the short men, Barney was undressed by the 3 short men and was then told to lie on a rectangular exam table. Unlike Betty, Barney's narrative of the exam was fragmented, and he continued to keep his eyes closed for most of the exam. A cup-like device was placed over his genitals. He did not experience an orgasm, though Barney thought that a sperm sample had been taken. The men scraped his skin and peered into his ears and mouth. A tube or cylinder was inserted into his anus. Someone felt his spine and seemed to be counting the vertebrae. This appears later in Whitley Strieber's abduction. When Betty reported extended conversations with the creatures in English, Betty said that he heard them speaking in a mumbling language he did not understand.
Yeah, Barney said that he heard him, yeah.
Yeah. Did I say Boomhauer? I meant Barney. The few times they communicated with him, Barney said it would be thought transference. At the time, he was unfamiliar with the word telepathy. He recalled being escorted from the ship and taken to his car, which was now near the road rather than in the woods. In a daze, he watched the ship leave. Barney remembered a light appearing on the road, and he said, "Oh no, not again." He recalled Betty's speculation that the light may have been the moon, though the moon had in fact set several hours earlier. Betty's hypnosis sessions were not as eventful. Under hypnosis, her account was very similar to the events of her recurrent dreams about the UFO encounter, with 2 notable differences. Under hypnosis, the short men did not have large noses and they had no hair. Simon suggested that Betty sketch a copy of the star map. She hesitated, thinking she would be unable to accurately depict the three-dimensional quality of the map that she says she saw on the ship. She drew only those that stood out in her memory. Her map consisted of 12 prominent stars connected by lines and 3 lesser ones that formed a distinctive triangle. She said that the stars she saw were connected by solid lines that formed trade routes, whereas dashed lines were to less traveled stars. And there is a graphic here which I will share.
Well, the star map.
That's the star map, which Marjorie Fish later discovered was Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli, and that the solid lines on the map were basically regular trade routes that they took all the time, and that the ones with the dotted lines were expedition routes.
Correct. Yeah, I remember seeing a picture of Betty and Barney with their dog Dulcie in another publication. I don't remember when, but yeah, they had a little dog. I guess the dog stay in the car. They don't really say. That was a long narrative there.
That was a long one. I'm going to take a little sip of water.
Yeah.
And we're back.
Okay, we're back. Then the next one is from Venezuela. That area called Roraima, where there's the mountain that's a flat top. I don't know if you've ever seen the picture. That looks like a mountain. The mountain with the top half cut off. It's a really isolated area there in Venezuela.
Like Devil's Tower?
Similar to that, yeah, but bigger, longer. This is a village called Cabanayan in Roraima, Venezuela, 1962, the afternoon. The witness was Valeriano Constanti, a local Piman Indian leader, Piman being the local tribe in the area. Indian leader and captain at Cabanayan for 20 years reported that his father has had an experience with 8 strange men. So it wasn't him, it was his father. The men were tall, blonde hair, and blue eyes, which he assumed were Germans. The strangers contracted 10 natives to transport equipment and other items to the Chimata Massif, which is another mountain there. They calculated that it would take 5 days to get there. When they arrived at the first Tipui, which is at the flat mesa, called El Tiperon, the one closer to Cabanayan. They were told to carefully place the equipment on the ground, and then their services would be no longer needed. The strangers allowed the natives to rest a bit and paid them handsomely for their services, and were then given instructions to return to Cabanayan. Strangely, the supposed Germans were never seen again, either leaving the area or around the area. They were never seen again. 5 years later, another group of similar-looking strangers, presumably German again, arrived at the Cabanayan and village, and again contracted several of the locals to carry equipment to Samantha. The men were not the same ones from before, but the equipment was the same, which consisted of metal containers, multicolor lights, and buttons, and what appeared to be screens, perhaps what today we call computers. On the way there, the Pemon Indians commented in their language if this group of strangers will also end up in Tirapon Tapui, the flat mesa, like the group from 5 years back. 2 of the Indians present had been members of the last expedition and had always wondered what had happened to the first group of men. Both men then planned to find out what was the purpose of the strangers, what the purpose of the strangers was in such a remote and almost uninhabited area. They both agreed that once they were told to return to Cabanayan, they will hang around a little bit longer, hiding in the brush. which they did after arriving at the walls of Tirepon the flat mesa. It's the walls. It looked like a square thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Indians were paid and told to return to Cabanayan, except for the two who hid in the brush to watch. The tall, blonde strangers rested for a while.
I don't suppose they mentioned what they paid them with.
It must have been either the local currency or maybe I don't know. It doesn't really go into detail.
Yeah.
The tall, blonde strangers rested for a while, and after 20 minutes, perhaps thinking that the Indians were long gone, they stood up in front of the walls of the tepui, the mesa, one next to the other in a line, and linked arms. The two Indians then watched, shocked as the walls of the tepui opened to the sides, like glass sliding doors. I guess it was obviously an artificial construction. Mm-hmm. One to the right, the other one to the left, and inside they could see a bright yellow light. The strangers then placed their backpacks and equipment inside the walls and then entered. Once they did, the walls closed again. The shocked witnesses, or Indians, decided to approach the area where they had seen the strangers enter, looking for any sign of grooves, buttons, or levers used to open the entrance, but found nothing. Everything appeared to be in its natural state, a rock solid wall. The strangers that entered the mountainside were also never seen again. There are rumors of strange crystal pyramids and other structures covered by vegetation in and around numerous flat mesas there in the area. So this is like it could be an alien base. I've heard other reports like Mount Shasta and in Puerto Rico El Yunque, in which similar events has been seen, which there appear to be walls open in the rock face. They open up and then they close, and there's nothing remains behind that could tell there was an opening there. Kind of weird. Maybe it's a basis.
It reminds me of what's the name? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name. The area, I think it's in Arizona, that John Lear said that there was a 5-story alien base underground.
Not Dulce. No.
Dulce. That's
Dulce? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then again, he says a lot of weird things.
Yeah. Him and Dottie. Anyway,
Yeah,
I'll read the
Richard
next
Doty.
one since the last one was very long for you. This one is, we'll go back to Sweden, a place called Bisnum in the province of Barmland. 1962, in the morning, Lily Nilsson, she was involved in other encounters, was picking berries with her 2 little daughters in the woods when she came upon a man, apparently from a landed object that she could see on the ground nearby. The man wore an overall-like outfit made of greenish material, a belt around his waist, and what appeared to be boots on his feet. My eyes are really... He was bareheaded and had long ash blonde hair. He was very good looking and had kind eyes. They exchanged a few words in Swedish, and when her husband came into view, Mrs. Nielsen asked the visitor to leave. She took the girls by their hands and went up to the husband, who thought she had been talking to another berry picker. This is sent to me directly from the researcher in Sweden, Sven-Olof Svensson. Anyway, this is another incident reporting, like the one in Venezuela before, tall, blonde, like Nordic entities.
There's a question for you, but it's not in English, so I'm going to have to ask you if you can read it.
Okay, Mr. Rosales, how do we verify the source of the information for these encounters many
each
times,
one, each single one is annotated with the
with a source, as many times it's difficult to, because me personally, most of them I have not investigated. I investigated a bunch of local cases in the 90s, and a few direct from witnesses that sent me information. But most of those cases are from other researchers worldwide that they research and they report, and you can't say 100% that it's true, but you be your own judge, like I say.
Well, and especially in the case of Betty and Barney Hill, it was, at least up to that time, the most investigated by both the Air Force and civilian UFO groups case to date in the entire world. Some of these cases come from the researchers themselves. Some are from the witnesses, but generally they're pretty well researched, and each one has at the bottom who researched the case.
Yeah, either a name or a link or a book or additional information, newspaper. I've been trying to work on the sources more, but yeah, there's always a source involved.
Okay, so this one is from 1962 in the evening in the North Sea off the coast of Norway. William Jefferson, chief engineer on board the St. Chad's, a fishing trawler from Hull, England, was traveling off the Norwegian coast. On a calm and tranquil day, Bill had just turned in after the skipper had instructed the trawling nets to be winched back aboard as no fish were being caught. As he was setting down in his bunk after 4 hours on call, the officer on the bridge ordered him to get back up on deck quickly. Wondering what was going on, Bill rushed up to the bridge, where he was stunned to see a huge dark gray disk, larger than the trawler, hovering a few feet above the funnel, making a slight humming noise. Quote, "It was so close you could see the panels joined by small squares and strange writing. Different colored lights could be seen, but they weren't illuminated. The skipper ordered the radio operator to contact the authorities and report what was happening. About 30 minutes later, 3 low-flying Norwegian jet fighters arrived. As they entered the airspace, the thing shot away and disappeared out of sight. The captain advised us we were not to say anything about the matter, as nobody would believe us." Unquote.
Yeah, the reason I included this case is because of the strange writing reported on the side of the UFO.
It's almost like serial numbers in aircraft that we make.
Strange that he didn't go into detail, but there's a source. The source is John Hansen and Don Holloway from the Haunted Skies, the Encyclopedia of British UFOs. Okay.
Yeah, I'll show that just to show that the files are all annotated with sources.
Sources, yeah. Okay, the next case is from the Ukraine. At that time, it was part of the Soviet Union.
Make sure if you ever go there that you call it Ukraine, because they'll beat you up if you say the Ukraine.
You told me that before, so sorry guys. Ukraine. And near Fastov in the Kiev region. It was 1962 at night. This incident was witnessed by a company of Soviet air defense radio technical troops in the P-35 radar unit located near this town during the night. Junior Sergeant Viktor Kovalenko was reportedly struck by a 1.5-ton truck that apparently lost its brakes and struck the man. As the other soldiers attended to him, it became apparent that he will die soon. His chest area was totally deformed due to the impact. The injured man, Kovalenko, was taken in the sanitary unit, and the division staff of Kiev was notified. The military surgeon that arrived from the central hospital in Kiev then examined the injured man, acknowledges him as non-transportable, and asked everyone not to worry him, thinking that he will not live for more than 10 to 15 hours because of the nature of his wounds. But amazingly, in the morning, on the third day, Victor was found completely safe and healthy, playing the harmonica. Only 2 whitish scars were visible in place of his terrific trauma. Medical attendant Sora Oganessian witnessed this event. Despite attempts by his colleagues to obtain information as to how the miracle had occurred, Victor remained silent, saying only that he was earnestly asked to keep silent, not saying who asked him to remain silent. The junior sergeant broke his silence 1.5 years later after a full discharge from the military service. He claimed that on the third night after his mortal wound, when he almost stopped breathing, the window of the medical attendant's barrack was suddenly lit up by a yellowish light, and a strange figure wearing a white loose-fitting overall appeared next to his cot. Looking at the figure, Victor only managed to see a pair of large violet-colored eyes that lacked irises, no irises, and the figure was huge, almost more than 2.5 meters in height.
Wow.
Giant, yeah, very tall. The humanoid entity pointed something like a pen at the witness and said, "Don't worry about anything, everything will return." I guess when he meant that it will return, that he will be cured. Then he pressed a button, and greenish lights began to shine on Victor's chest. In a moment, he was able to breathe again, and then he lost consciousness. He remembered nothing more. After the miraculous healing, Victor discovered that he had the gift of foretelling the future. He had only to tightly close his eyes, and the necessary picture or image will be displayed in front of his inner sight. It would flash for a moment in a crimson color, and then it would vanish. The source, a soldier in the same unit, reported seeing the witness and his grievous wounds. And this is from a Russian researcher, Leonid Somov. He interviewed, obviously interviewed a couple of the soldiers there involved. So this is a case of a cure or a healing from some kind of entity. Extraterrestrial, we don't know, but it was definitely a anomalous entity.
It's really interesting when you think about it. There are cases where I think people get too close to craft, and maybe the UFO knots don't know that they're there. Like the guy that had the burn mark in a grid shape on his chest when the vented hot air.
Yeah, Manitoba, 1967. Yeah.
And other times they seem to heal people, like in the Francis Walton abduction.
Yeah, you figure why they heal some people and others they don't.
Yeah. It's high strangeness. They call it high strangeness for a reason. Yeah. So this case is in San Francisco, California, 1962 at nighttime. The main witness, 6-year-old Roxanne, was living in San Francisco with her mother and her sister, Denise. Her sister was 9 years old at the time. They were playing in their backyard. They lived in a large old Dutch colonial house, 2-story. Both girls were playing in the backyard, and Roxanne had a favorite tree that she would climb with a nice groove spot from her sitting in it so much. And she would climb up there and sink into her thoughts. Sometimes she would talk out loud to her tree. She even named the tree. So she was up there, and the sister was picking flowers. She then lost track of what her sister was doing because she was swinging on the tree. She could barely hear her mom's voice coming from a patio outside the backyard. She could hear her mother calling, "Roxanne, Denise, dinner time." She climbed down and started running toward the back door, and she said, "I'll get Denise." And she ran back to tell Denise it was almost dinner time, but she wasn't in the backyard anymore, so she thought maybe she wanted to do something naughty. They were not supposed to go over the fence because there was an empty lot on the other side. There was a house next door, and the next space over was an empty lot full of grass. When she jumped on the fence, she was standing on a 2x4, stretching with all her might to see over to see if her sister had gone over there. Roxanne was horrified by what she saw. Her sister was laying down, and two men were there, one bent all the way down on his knees, and her sister's head was limp in his lap. Her sister was not conscious, and the other man was bent down over her with a syringe. The man had a syringe, and he held it to her sister's arm, and Roxanne was literally shocked into silence at first, because she could not believe what she was seeing because of the way they were dressed. They were wearing black pants and black capes and Zorro-type hats, which she later learned when she got older. When he was about to give her sister the injection, Roxanne screamed her name as loud as she could. And then she thought it would be better to get her mother because they wouldn't leave her alone. She was screaming, "Leave my sister alone," and then started crying, and she slipped off the bench and scratched her palm, which she didn't even feel at the time, and started running for her mother, and then fell down on the flower bed. Then her instincts told her to save her sister, and that she didn't have time to get to her mother. She then jumped over the fence. She had never been able to get up that high before, but the men were gone. Her sister was waking up, and she asked her, "Denise, what were they doing to you and why? Who were they?" Her sister didn't seem to know what Roxanne was talking about, and asked her, "What's the matter with you? You look scared to death. You're all white." She told her sister what had happened to her, but she didn't believe her. Her sister then came up over the fence, but seemed a bit groggy and very tired, as she had just woken up. Roxanne didn't tell her mother what happened, but she did tell her father.
Okay, so I don't know. Who were those two men wearing Zorro capes and hats?
You got me, brother.
Yeah, I'm telling you. This is from Coast to Coast. Art Bell mentioned.
Love Art Bell.
Yeah. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is 1962, 22:30 hours from Penang in Malaysia. It's kind of a weird case here. A young Malaysian girl was traveling home with her parents after closing their shop on a trishaw. This is like a bicycle rickshaw, and was on Pitt Street near a local temple when the young girl was stunned to see four strange 5-foot tall spindly figures wearing cloaks and hoods. They were carrying a long box at its corners. They were each at one corner. They were shuffling in an absurdly fast way, like they have been speeded up somehow. There appeared to be someone or something inside the box, as it seemed to be moving. The young girl experienced a great fear overcome her, and screamed at the top of her voice. Incredibly, her parents appear unable to see the figures that quickly passed out of view. To this day, she still experiences the same fear when she sees people walking in the shadows when she drives at night. This is from the new publisher from Flying Saucer Review, Harry Challenger. And he spoke to the witness himself. It's kind of weird because what were they carrying in that box? Those spindly figures. Strange. Who or what they were carrying in that box.
And Mr. M.H. says, just like the cigarette-smoking dogs in trench coats and the Fonz Bigfoot guy, now Zorro capes and high hats. High strangeness galore.
You got it, yeah.
Yes, indeed. And this next case...
this one's weird, too.
Has this as the graphic. Can you set this graphic up for us, Albert?
This is what the witness thought the entity looked like. Mm-hmm. Kind of transparent and blue in nature. as it appeared in his, I think that was in the backyard. But it's a rendition. It's not really a photo.
Is it a statue?
That is supposed to be the entity, but it's like a
Oh,
drawing.
it's like a
drawing of
hologram. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is in Old Tappan, New Jersey, 1962, time 23:30 hours. The witness was a farmer named Frederick von Kruger who was getting ready for bed. He undressed and went right to sleep. His next awareness was that he was standing naked outside of his house in the yard with no idea of how he got there. He was walking out from the house and passed a round metal storage building that he had there. He felt that he was walking involuntarily, but he wasn't resisting it. Ahead of him, he saw what he thought at first was his round building, but then realized he'd passed it already. Coming closer, he saw that it was two soup bowls inverted one atop the other with a small dome, and it had landed in his field. Classic saucer.
Yeah.
During this time, his wife, who had not yet gone to bed, heard what she thought were voices outside, but couldn't understand anything said. She searched for her husband in the house, and finding the bed empty, assured that he'd gone outside, possibly talking to someone. Assumed that he'd gone outside. She called out, got no answer, no further conversation occurred, and she let it go. Meanwhile, von Kruger found himself standing next to the vehicle and almost on top of a platform of softly luminescent ivory with various colors swimming within it. Like psychedelic aliens, man. Upon stepping onto this platform, he was raised into the craft. Once inside his inner corridor, he was bathed in a low-intensity light. He describes this as something like ivory, but his words give more the impression of something pearlescent. He wandered a bit down the corridor and entered a room which contained a gray-colored chair. He felt compelled to sit in the chair, facing what seemed to be a curtain of hanging discs just in front. The chair then moved into the soft disc wall, and he found that he merged into it like a mold. Once completely inside the mold, two soft objects fitted over his ears, and he fell asleep. As von Kruger regains his feeling of self-conscious mobility, leaves the ship, and steps onto a location like but not identical to Earth. It is at this moment that he jumps off the craft to the ground, and he turns and has a fairly good look at his two captors. His description is terribly inadequate. All you can divine from his words is that they were humanoid in shape and looked as if they were made from the same light, pearlescent and somewhat transparent, that he'd experienced everywhere on board. When von Kruger jumped, he floated gently to the ground. This area of the planet was desert and mountains, almost entirely of red sedimentary rock. He was just in Oklahoma. Scrub brush scattered about, and trees ran up the hillsides. Above the mountains in the distance was a bluish haze. 4 others of the creatures were standing
somewhat.
I just moved and I forgot where I was.
4 other of the creatures were standing somewhat near a huge tunnel entrance, which was mechanically carved out of the mountain.
Okay.
Yeah.
This tunnel was extremely long, and the lighting was dim, coming from somewhere above. Von Kruger walked along, hugging one sign, mainly unmet and uneventful. Finally, he came to an offshoot where you could see down at the end of a lake of water, all this apparently still inside the mountain. At the bottom of the side passage, he found a bench by the lake. There he rested and tried to think. There was no sound, no birds, and no animals of any kind. Out in the lake there seemed to be a geyser spraying shimmering water, dancing like 1,000 glittering mirrors. Von Kruger felt at place here. This place, due at least to the dancing geyser had life. The rest of the planet, the tunnel, the transparent people, seemed like parts of a tomb. During his time, von Kruger saw two separate people emerge from doors in the mountain wall and walk right by him. He then saw two of them emerge from a canoe in a dark cave area, cross to an archway out in the lake, and disappear behind it. Von Kruger was puzzled and concerned that these beings didn't care whether he was there or not. He wandered briefly to the lake shore and saw small fish therein. This led to a concern as to whether other more dangerous things might be in there, and he backed away. Ultimately, he decided that even the pleasant lake was a dead end and went back up the tunnel. At the entrance, the four beings were still standing about and still taking no notice of him. They never moved nor spoke. He made his way over to the pearlescent platform and jumped on it. Into the vehicle he went, no sign of the beings anywhere. He found the room with the chair and the curtain of discs. He sat, the curtain encompassed him, and he slept. Apparently he then found himself back on his field and returned home.
This is from a book by Mr. William Eisenman called The Transparent People. This is a weird case. Where was he taken? To another planet, another dimension? Pretty weird.
Somewhere on Earth?
I don't know.
I mean, they say that there's more Earth and there's more water inside the Earth in the mantle than there is on the surface.
Yep.
So who knows? We are getting to that part of the show, so make sure and get your entrance in for the giveaway. Just go to https://bit.ly into the fringe and enter the giveaway there. And the next one is for you, Albert.
Next one is from a place in Germany. At that time, it was East Germany, called Stendal, in the Sachsen-Anhalt area of Germany. It was January 1962, 1830 hours. There existed in Stendal a large lake with a small island in it. In January 1962, this lake was frozen, and a group of schoolboys were skating on the ice. Today the lake has been filled in. Together with the others, the main witness, Norbert Haas, then 16 years old, he saw a large flying star in the sky at about 6:30 p.m. In contrast to his five friends who went home, Norbert wanted to continue observing the light. He skated towards the island upon which the bright lens-shaped object was descending. It was about 25 meters in diameter and remained suspended in the air 5 meters above the island. The object was then twice as large as the island and so bright that Norbert's eyes hurt when he looked at it. At the same time, he felt a prickling sensation on his skin. He heard his friends yelling at him to come back, and then he lost consciousness. When he again became conscious, he lay on the embankment of the lake, 150 meters away from the island. His skates were lying next to him. His watch had stopped at 7 p.m. His eyes hurt, and he had a headache. After walking the short distance home, it turned out to be shortly after midnight, and his folks had been waiting for him. His face was reddened as if he had been suffering from a sunburn. There was a hole on the right side of his nose. The upper layer of skin had been removed within a circle of 3 millimeters in diameter. The dermatologist diagnosed a high radiation, talking about radiation again, dose, and had Norbert transferred to the Johanneder Hospital in Stendal, where he was treated over a period of 3 weeks. He had nightmares and began to talk in his sleep. On the 4th day of his confinement, he was visited by several physicians, accompanied by 2 men from the state security police, the East German Stasi, who wanted to find out more about the radiation source responsible for his illness. I want to know where he found, he got the radiation from. He had to answer numerous questions for them and fill out a long questionnaire. A few days later, 2 psychologists performed several additional tests on him and put him under hypnosis. This was repeated the following 2 days, each time for a 3-hour period. At last, Norbert began to recall some of the events that had taken place, and after he had seen the craft come down, he remembered having lain on a table and undergoing some kind of X-ray examination. He was surrounded by handsome human beings in tight-fitting white dresses or uniforms. Their turtleneck collars were decorated with emblem of a green tree. So they had like an emblem of a green tree on the neck. Interesting. In West Germany, the witness was not willing to undergo a further examination, but it may be possible to locate the ecstasy documentation of the case. It's not known if it was ever found. This is from German researcher Michael H. Hesseman. Interesting case. Again, radiation plays a part on the incident. Mm-hmm. And from East Germany back then, it was a highly controlled state.
Yeah, it's intriguing that the report got out at all.
Yeah.
So the next one is north of Albuquerque, New Mexico, 1963, the time unknown. An ovoid disc about 12 meters in diameter and about 3.9 meters in height crashed to the north of Albuquerque and Kirtland Air Force Base, approximately between Sandoval and Santa Fe County. The crashed disc was moved to the nearby Sandia Military Reservation and hidden in a hangar there. One side of the craft was slightly damaged. A military contingent of Marines guarded the craft, one of which leaked data about the incident to a California researcher, Michael Johnston, who in turn forwarded the information to Leonard Stringfield. A scientific research team was attempting to penetrate the disk, at times even using a laser. They eventually were able to enter the disk. 5 dead gray alien bodies were extracted from the disk. 2 humans, apparently abducted by the aliens, were also found on board, dead or alive. There is supposedly a color film detailing how the disk's hull was breached. The craft was left at the base and was later transferred to another location. Data on this incident was also leaked to Bud Hopkins.
So this is like from Leonard Stringfield, UFO crash retrievals report.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the 1963. Well, we're still getting reports of crash disk, not only in 1947, but this is 1963 now. Interesting. I wonder what, if we really have a whole bunch of craft that we have, reverse engineer and stuff. I believe that there's been crashes of UFOs.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's go into the next one. Oh, man. This is from Australia. An area called Simpson Desert, Northern Territory, Australia. It's isolated there. An Aboriginal man from the Simpson Desert, where he walks his camels and horse, as he had done for 50 years, reported various encounters. The man is age 70. About 6 years ago, he was driving 100 kilometers east of Alice Springs with his family when their car broke down and they had to walk 20 kilometers to their community. As they were walking, they saw an enormous cigar-shaped object anchored next to a nearby hill. I guess it was hovering there. It was about 5 kilometers away and appeared to be translucent, except for the edges. When the sun hit the object around 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon, it became clearer. He guessed it to be about 100 meters long and about 20...
That's 300 feet plus.
Yeah. And around 20 to 30 meters high. He said Aboriginal people see a lot of strange things in the desert, but they prefer not to talk about it in case other people think they're mad
Or if they're on a vision quest or something.
Yeah.
Walkabout.
He spoke of a number of abduction experiences. He's often alone in the desert with his animals. One time in 1963, this year, he was cooking his dinner next to a spring when 3 beings approached him and asked him to go with them. Speaking telepathically. He declined, saying that he was hungry and wanted to eat. So he invited them to join him, and they came and sat down beside the fire. He said they looked human and were slightly translucent, like the craft. So this is again like what von Kruger saw, translucent humanoid.
Mm-hmm.
Pearlescent. Their eyes were larger and slanted like Asians, and their mouths were smaller than a human. They did not eat. They did not appear to be wearing clothing, and they were friendly. He was not afraid. They appeared slightly familiar to him, but he could not remember where he had seen them before. So he often camped in the desert with his swag. I'm not sure what that is.
Swag. It means with his stuff.
At night, and he will wake up in the morning with his pillow soaked in blood. The blood had come from his nose. This had happened to him a number of times. One time he woke up and he was 200 kilometers from his camp site, and his animals were with him. He does not know how he was moved to that location, and he was then forced to walk back. That's a long way.
It's a long way to walk. Yeah.
He mentioned that that's what they do. The Aboriginals in Australia, they walk for miles. They just walk.
Yeah.
He mentioned that he had seen different extraterrestrials in other areas, but he did not describe them. Yes, that they look different. He said his community could talk about stories or what they have seen. This is from a UFO research group in Australia. So I guess this guy's been involved in different encounters and his communities. I'm thinking a lot of the Aboriginal have encounters with UFOs, but most of them they keep silent about it.
Yeah, the thing that is burning in my mind, Albert, about tonight's coterie of cases is a little terrifying to me. The disc that was going down that looked like a P-51 Mustang on fire.
Right.
It was like they had this image on file from, the Second World War.
Possibly.
And they could just, holographically, even when they were in trouble, just change it into whatever they wanted. If that's the case, man, we're in a lot of trouble.
They could make us see anything they want.
Yeah, I sometimes think that is the case. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Antiderivative Jill. Hello, Jill.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you guys, too.
Do we have the wheel ready?
Yes.
All right.
Fortune.
Well, let's give that a spin, and we'll find out who wins the book today.
Canadian Spider-Man.
Yay!
Congratulations.
Spider-Man.
Is he from Canada? I'm assuming.
He is from Canada.
Okay.
He is one of my mods here, and another one of my mods here is Gap Stargate, who says, Mr. Rosales, you are amazing. And Canadian Spider-Man says, whoop, whoop.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah, congratulations. Cool stuff. Lots of congratulations.
Here's the book.
There's the book. And Jill, Canadian Spider-Man wants to know if you tipped the wheel on his account.
No, I don't have control over the code on the wheel. So.
And hello,
He got
Don
lucky.
McDouglas. Sorry, you were
Hi,
saying,
Don.
Jill?
Nope, Spidey just got lucky.
Oh, okay. Good enough. Well, thanks for coming on and spinning the wheel for us. And our
You're
winner
welcome.
can get my email address from the About section on my YouTube channel page, and email me information, which I will then email to Albert, and he can sign the book and send it along. And Gap Stargate has a question. Mr. Rosales, Mr. MH, would you like to know when his next book is coming out in the Humanoid Encounters series? Would like to know when.
There's been a delay. I'm working on the 2016 through 2021, and that's going to be my last book. But
It'll be your second to last book.
yeah, okay, you could say that. But yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be within the next couple months. I'm going to send everything I have to my publisher, see what happens. But I'm hoping sooner than later.
Cool. And Canadian Spider-Man says, that is fantastic, and signed even. Wow.
It will be worth millions
cool.
of dollars 30 years from now.
What's that?
It will be worth millions of dollars 30 years from now.
Yep. I do want to mention that for anybody that's interested, we had Kathleen Marden on the show not too long ago. It's in the Into the Fringe playlist on my channel, which is youtube.com/cardinalsin. It's the channel that you're on right now. And she's Betty and Barney Hill's niece and a UFO investigator in her own right, and she will be conducting an abduction roundtable with some pretty hard hitters, some people that if you've read any abduction books, you'll know who they are. So we're looking forward to that, aren't we, Jill?
Yes, absolutely.
I gotcha.
Oh, wait a minute. I wasn't
All
listening. Sorry.
It's okay. I was just testing you. So that'll be fun. So Jill will say goodbye to you for now.
Goodbye.
And
Bye.
thanks again for the help.
Anti-derivative. Where'd she get that name?
Well, she's not derivative. She's anti-derivative.
She is? Okay, I get it.
So that's why I call her anti-derivative Jill, like Boris Karloff.
You sound just like him.
Well, thanks. I did want to, in the waning moments here, put up a couple images of the card of the artist that we were talking about. And his name again is Jason Gleaves, and he created the artwork that we shared at the beginning of the show. And he's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever On Stellar is.
Jason Gleaves, okay.
And Twitter, if I didn't mention that. And then you can also contact him these ways and order your very own humanoids and make them encounter each other. So
Okay.
We'll go ahead and finish up. And I did want to ask you, Albert, are we going to go back or forward for the next one?
Forward. So we went up to 64, so it should be 65 to 69.
I know that we missed a few.
Yeah, I gotta get. There's a couple I don't have on hand. Hopefully, I have that one on hand. We'll see. If not, I'll order it.
Okay, very good.
No big deal.
Thanks again to everyone who was here, mods and chat, and of course, Mr. Rosales.
Darius Munchausen.
Yes. And another one of my excellent mods. And that's it for this episode. Again, thanks to everyone who is here. And it's Cardinal Sin out.